Hello, I am Sarah Abel and welcome to this edition of the Marriage Challenge, brought to you by Care for the Family. This fun and informative monthly podcast is designed to help any couple strengthen their relationship. And today I am thrilled to be joined by Pauline and Owen Hylton, who are going to talk about a topic that can cause friction for many of us in our relationships, and that is coping with different family backgrounds and relating to our in-laws. Now, by way of introduction, for anyone listening who doesn't know them, Pauline and Owen have been married 24 years in September, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah? They have 3 daughters ranging in age from 15 to 20, and they live in South East London. Owen leads a church in Brixton and Pauline works supporting deaf children in a mainstream school. Together they regularly speak on marriage and parenting. Pauline and Owen, welcome to this edition of the Marriage Challenge. It's lovely to be here with you.
It's great to be here too.
Thank you.
The first thing we would love to know is, how did you both meet each other?
Well, we first met probably when we were teenagers, sort of late teens, and it was through my older sister who knew Pauline and her brothers. And at one point, I remember Pauline and her brothers coming over with some other friends to my sister's flat, which was at the end of the road where I lived with my parents. And that was the first time I met Pauline.
Actually, if the truth be known, when we first met each other, we didn't like each other, did we?
No, we didn't. No.
So what changed?
We really didn't like each other. I guess time, wasn't it? A couple of years later, we started spending more time together, got to know each other, and that was the beginning.
Yeah, we actually became really good friends.
Yes, that's true.
And we were probably best friends for years before we dated. And when we eventually dated, we knew it wouldn't be long before we knew whether we were going to get married or not. And so, it wasn't really. So, we eventually got married in September 1990.
It's time now to see how well you know each other in our guest couple marriage challenge. Pauline's already laughing nervously. We asked each of you a question about the other, so will you get the answer right? Okay, Owen, we're going to start with you.
Okay.
So we asked Pauline, what would she say is your best quality? So I'll give you the choices.
I did have an answer.
Would she say A, that you're very practical and supportive? Would she say B, she likes it that you never settle and always look to improve? Or would she say C, that you always put her first?
I think she would have said B.
Never settling.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yay!
She said you were all of the above, but B was
okay.
most.
Yeah.
So that was good. Okay, so Pauline, your turn. What would Owen say was his favourite holiday? Was it A, Paul and Charlotte's in France for 2 weeks, B, Sidmouth in Devon for a week, or C, a week in Norfolk?
Maybe Paul and Charlotte's, because you did absolutely nothing there. Whereas Sidmouth, I did make you do some stuff. And your perfect holidays to do nothing. Paul and Charlotte's.
Oh, 100%. You got it right.
Hey! Is that because you do nothing?
I just liked it.
Oh, brilliant. There you go. 100%.
There you go.
So today on the challenge, we want to talk about our family backgrounds and how those can impact our relationship as a couple.
Yep.
For you, how would you describe your 2 family backgrounds? If you had to just give us if you just had to give a summary of each one, what would you say?
So they're very different.
Poles apart.
If I describe mine, and then I'll get Pauline, you can then describe yours. So my family background is my parents are Jamaican, and they came over here in about 1960, and they met over here. And I have 3 sort of siblings who are sort of similar age to me. I've got an older sister, an older brother, and a younger sister. And my mum actually died a number of years ago, and so I grew up in a Jamaican household, which was a Christian household. My mum took us to church, and in many ways it was typical of that culture, the way I grew up in terms of how we lived, how we sort of worked, and how we sort of dealt with people and stuff. growing up, we didn't actually have many other family around us. It was really just us. So that's my background.
And Pauline, how would you describe your family background?
I didn't even know any black people when I grew up, come to think of it, the area I lived. Very typical for what I know, white middle class, mum cooking and cleaning, dad the gardening and the car, very typical, stereotypical roles. And I grew up not doing a lot, which was nice. But that probably sums it up. Had two older brothers, and so I was the youngest only girl, so there was perks to that as well.
And when you two came together and you got married, what was it like bringing those two different backgrounds together?
Yeah, no, it was interesting because when you date, you only live in what's common to both of you.
Yeah.
So you go out, your friends are the same, and we're hanging out, we're doing stuff that we like to do together, and we're not thinking about the fact that our backgrounds are actually more different. So when you do eventually marry, those things can hit you a little bit. It can be a bit of a shock. So we spent a lot of time in our early years of our marriage just trying to work out, how do we do this? How do we make these two things work? How do we make our marriage work and also and yet keep good relationship with our families? So we were always trying to work that out, always talking about that.
I think the biggest shock for me is you were born and brought up here, so to all intents and purposes, there wasn't a lot of difference, was there, between us. But when I met your family, who were born in Jamaica, grew up in Jamaica and came over here, they were culturally different, quite remarkably so, whereas you weren't. And so I found that a real challenge. Actually, it was something unfamiliar to me, I wasn't used to it. And lots of problems arose from that as we got engaged and got married. We started hitting them closer than we had when we were just dating, weren't we?
I grew up in a background where both my mum and dad worked, and they both worked long hours. My older sister had a level of, I suppose, responsibility for us younger siblings. She used to cook, clean and tidy up, and I remember even being told off by her. And and that was very different, I know, from how Pauline sort of was raised.
Yeah.
And
all I had to do was wipe up, and I remember trying to get out of that. So it was quite a shock when I found your family doing all the stuff they did at such a young age as well, wasn't it? Ironing and...
In fact, I remember when we first got married, in the very early stages of being married, when it came to tidying up the flat, Pauline took a day off.
Don't say that.
Because she'd never done that before. So I had learnt to cook. My dad taught me to cook when I was a teenager.
It is very true. I got married from home, so I wasn't used to, running a home or a flat or anything, and my parents did everything for me. And whilst it was great, and I did love it, it didn't really equip me for my own sort of married life and that, and I couldn't manage to factor in cleaning the house and cooking and working. It was like, so it took me a while to get used to it. And I did. You keep going on about that. I booked off one day, and now
Okay, we don't do that now.
I know in-laws are often the butt of lots of jokes, and, and you only got to say the word mother-in-law and you get all sorts of reactions from people, don't you? But for you two, how did you what were those relationships like with each other's in-laws and getting used to that, especially when they were, it sounds like, very different to what you'd known and sort of grown up with?
Well, this happened not long after we got married. We had gone to bed one night about sort of, I don't know, maybe 10 p.m. or something. And I remember hearing this knock at the door.
I think it was later than 10. I
think we'd gone to bed at 10. The knock came later. Yeah. I remember hearing this knock at the door and thinking to myself, oh my goodness, who's that?
And then there was a knock on the window, because it was a ground floor flat. There was a knock on the window, which was a little bit more disturbing. And I was really, oh my gosh.
So I got up and I went to the door, feeling really brave. And at the door was my mum.
Oh.
And I was, Mum.
What are you doing here?
Yeah, what are you doing here? This was gone 11 o'clock, it was dark. Yeah. And my mum was at the door, and she had just brought us a cake that she had baked, a banana cake, I think it was. She said, I just brought you a cake that I baked for you.
She was always...
I said, Mum, that's great. That's great. Thank you for this cake. And that was not untypical. My mum wasn't surprised. She wasn't like, oh, sorry, it's late. There was nothing like that. It was just quite a normal thing in my family that the time of day didn't necessarily determine what you did.
I found that quite challenging. I know it sounds a bit silly, but it was one of many of an occasion of them phoning up really late as well. And again, if it was after 10 o'clock, you wouldn't really phone unless there was a need to.
Did you have to address any of this with them, or was it more about you two coming to a kind of discussion and agreement together?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to do both.
Yeah.
So I think that you have to find an agreed approach for both of you as a couple.
Yeah.
And then you have to, where appropriate, address the relevant in-law. And obviously what you're always trying to do, I found what you're always trying to do is you want to retain and maintain relationship. And therefore it becomes really important how you address that. And it becomes really important that you're listening, even if we're going to do something different. Otherwise you can break relationship when you don't need to. So it's worth working on those things. And those were the sorts of things in our early days of marriage that we would work on. And we can say now, 24 years later, it was worth doing that. Because we now have a good relationship with my dad. We have a good relationship with Pauline's parents. And we've learnt to be able to manage some of those differences.
So for other people, perhaps if they're in a similar situation, they've got difficulties with an in-law and something's going on, is there some advice that you wish you'd been given right at the beginning that you could, give other people that would help in those situations, do you think, with the sort of knowledge and hindsight that you've got now?
Yeah, I think that although it can be a little bit awkward and difficult, I would address issues that come up. So I wouldn't withdraw from them. Because if you do address them, first of all, it helps you because you're addressing your own stuff. Because that stuff doesn't go away. Stuff you withdraw from doesn't disappear from you. It just becomes a bit bigger and maybe the issue becomes. And secondly, I would address it, particularly with children, because one of the things that I've always, as we've got older, tried to do with our girls is almost model how we want them to be with us when we get older. And so they watch how we are with our parents. And that's always been quite important to me.
Yeah, I wish somebody had sort of challenged me to face my difficulties, really. Because as Owen said, it does come out, and it has come out in other scenarios. Because we found a way of dealing with the situation, but not dealing with the root problem. And that's what I wished somebody had challenged me on.
Yeah, so tackle it head on. Don't bury it or find coping mechanisms. But
exactly,
exactly.
Tackle it head on. Face your fears, face your difficulties, and work through them.
Great advice. Now, at the end of every marriage challenge, we set a marriage challenge for the people listening. So what's one challenge that we could set people this month that we could all try at home?
So I think the challenge would be that you can either meet with a member of your family, or you can plan to get together with family over the next month or so in order just to spend some time with them, some relational time with them. It does really help. That would be our experiences. It really helps keep those relationships going.
Brilliant. So thank you for that challenge. And for those listening, let us know how you get on the Facebook page. We'd love to hear your comments, ideas and suggestions and how you got on with the challenge. And if you're enjoying the Marriage Challenge podcast, please do sign up for regular updates and news. You can go to the website careforthefamily.org.uk and click on the Marriage Challenge page, and you can sign up there for news and updates. And for anyone who does, you'll also get 20% discount for the Care for the Family shop for any resources that you might want to buy there. So that's all for today, other than to say thank you very much to Owen and Pauline for sharing your stories and for giving such good nuggets of wisdom and advice as well. So thank you. And we'll see you next time on the Marriage Challenge podcast. Until then, goodbye.
You have been listening to the Marriage Challenge podcast. For further information about our courses, resources and events, visit us at www.careforthefamily.org.uk.